This meeting is being recorded.
Lovely. Thank you so much for joining our workshop this morning, an introduction to green fundraising. I'm going first and then I'll hand over to Matthew. It's a really short section and it's a really big topic. So to manage your expectations, I'm not going to have a magic answer. We're not going to get to the end of these 40 minutes and you'll think, oh, great. You know, I know exactly where the funding is going to come for my project. Hopefully I can skim over it, give you some pointers, tell you a little bit about how to approach your fundraising. Matthew's going to go into more detail on how to write your case for support, and we'll point you towards useful resources which we've created for churches to help you do just that. To introduce myself, so I work for the Church of England Environment Programme in Church House, Westminster. I'm part of the Church and Cathedral Buildings Division. So my work is all about how we're going to get to net zero carbon, how are we going to tackle our listed buildings and reduce their energy, and also the biodiversity of churchyards around them. Before that, I was a grant manager on an environmental grants programme for churches in Islington. This photo is me and the vicar of St Augustine's Church, Highbury, New Park, in front of the solar panels that the charity I worked for had helped him fund and get on the roof. So I know a bit about the kind of environmental work that is needed in churches, but also a little bit about how a grant manager thinks about deciding what projects to fund. So we're talking about green fundraising. What does that mean? So you're likely to be thinking either about a project that's going to be reducing your energy use. So that might be new heating systems, it might be more efficient lighting systems, it might be solar panels on the roof, or it might be simpler things like lagging your pipes and fixing the broken windows. Or you might be thinking about projects to do with your green spaces, your gardens, nature and biodiversity. So if those are the kind of projects that you're looking for funding for, this little short taster session is going to give you some ideas about how to go about it. The first thing to say, and I reckon that you all know this already, is that fundraising is tough. So a really good start point is just to ask yourself, how can we actually minimise the amount that we need to raise in the first place? So that's thinking through the project that you have planned and thinking, are there ways that we can make this project cost a little bit less? Are there ways it can pay for itself? So particularly things like LED lighting and solar panels will reduce your energy bills that we all know are rising. Can those projects pay for themselves? And if so, you might be able to fund them through repayable lending rather than through fundraising. Do we have enough in reserves? Do we need to fundraise for it, or can we actually afford it from the church's reserves? And is there a way that we can earn the money? Are there any lettings that we can increase? Is there anything we can do to bring in income rather than having to fundraise? Assuming that you've thought through all of those things and you know, right, we need to fundraise. What kind of funding can you consider for your green projects? And the answer really is all the same sources of all of the same sorts of funding that you would consider for any other project that you might have done in your church over the years. So individual donations from members of the parish, events fundraising. You can run events and you have to think about then how to maybe theme them environmentally. So it might be, say, a clothes swap or a sponsored bike ride. They can be quite time consuming, but they're also very good for publicity and getting the word out in your parish about what it is that you want to do. Potentially there are some major donors that you could approach. A survey of a large number of major donors about what motivated them to give. The highest rated things were feeling that my money will make a difference and being already interested in the cause. So it's thinking to yourself, is there anyone that we think we could approach that we know is motivated by environmental matters, that we know that they have shown some interest in this cause? And then those are the kind of people you might want to approach. There are legacies, of course, but that's a very long-term project, unlikely to be able to be a quick way to fundraise for something. Corporate support. So for environmental projects, this is probably most likely through donations, for example, from DIY stores and garden stores. They might be willing to donate some of the materials for your project. And particularly, they're often interested in doing a volunteering day. So perhaps you want to build a new sensory garden in your churchyard, and you might approach a local garden centre and ask, Could they donate any of the materials? And could their staff come and help you for the day to put it in place? There's public sector funding that is limited, but there is some funding out there. For example, if you're changing your heating system to get off oil and gas, there is the boiler upgrade scheme, and there is the lottery, the National Lottery Communities Fund and the National Lottery Heritage Fund, but they are both extremely competitive. They don't currently have any specific environmental funds within them, but they do expect high environmental standards from any project that applies to them. And then, of course, there are trusts and foundations. So trusts and foundations are often the kind of default thing that people think of when they are approaching fundraising. There are many, many trusts and foundations, 8,800 in the UK. And in a typical year, they give a little bit under £3 billion collectively, of which about £100 million goes towards Church of England parishes. They vary enormously in their size and in their objectives. And within that whole breadth of grant-making trusts, there will be some that are faith funders, and so you would be approaching them from a church perspective. There are some which are community funders, so you need to be stressing the community benefits of your project, and there are some which are environmental funders, and there you really want to be looking at what are the energy saving benefits, carbon benefits, biodiversity benefits of your project. There's a link on the slide here, and I'll come back to it later, of where you can find our grant directories on the Church of England website, and I'll show you that later on. So you've got your project, you know you need to fundraise for it. A really good first step is to think about your costs and just a rough plan of where you think the money might be able to come from. So in this worked example, we've worked out we're going to change the lighting in the church. The gross cost of that, including a bit for contingency and remembering VAT, let's say that's going to be £30,000. It's going to save us some money on our bills, so that's going to be about £5,000. And then we have to find the other 25. So let's say we can get 2,500 from reserves. We think we might be able to do a big push and get £10,000 from the congregation. We've got a couple of ideas for events, which we think could raise 3,500. So we need to find 9,000 from trusts and foundations. It's just a simple worked example. You'll know your project, what scale it is. It might be much bigger than this. It might be much smaller than this. But getting that sort of back of the envelope scale and size of your project early on is really useful. Then you want to create a case for support for your project. And Matthew's going to talk about this in more detail, so I'll skim past it fairly fast. Your case of support is a short written document showing why someone should give you the money for this project. Imagine that person was sat in front of you, you were making your case. What would you say to them that means that they should give their money to your project rather than all the other demands? So why is your project needed? What difference the project is going to make in terms of its impact and why it's important to do it? What's it going to cost? When is it going to happen? How will you deliver it? How will you monitor and evaluate success? This is very important to funders. They want to know that you've thought through how you'll know whether your project is successful or not. How ready are you? Are you already on the starting blocks? Have you got the faculty that you need? Have you got the planning permission if you need it? Once you've got that written down, you can then cut and paste from it for different application forms for different funders, because they'll all have their own form. So if you have it all written down in one place, maybe even like a one-page summary version of it as well, and then when you come to approach any given funder, you can be cutting and pasting from that document. You need to be really clear about your impact. And I said earlier, there are 3 different types of funders: the church, the community, and the environmental. With your environmental funders, they're going to want you to be able to demonstrate the impact of your project on the environment. So let's say it's an energy saving project, like a new heating system or a new lighting system, or fixing the broken windows, doing the pipe lagging. Your funder is likely to want you to be able to express the carbon emissions reduction, so the tons of greenhouse gas emissions that are going to be saved through your project. If you've got an architect or a contractor, they can probably estimate that for you. For example, if you have a quote for new solar panels on your church, quite typically the quote that you get will have on there the number of tons of carbon that the installation of those solar panels will save. If you don't have that from your contractor, if you take the kilowatt hours on your energy bill and use a sensible percentage reduction that you think you'll be able to get from the project that you're doing, that's a good start. If what you're doing is a project around your green spaces, around biodiversity, There you'll need to be able to express to your funder the species that you'll be planting or that you'll be protecting, the area of green space that you'll be creating. So what are the nature benefits? If it's a church funder, they want to know about the impact on your church and your church community. So are you going to have low utility bills in that now, which mean that your church will be more financially sustainable? Are you going to make the church more comfortable through the new heating system, which means more people will be able to attend? Are you going to install better lighting? And that means parishioners can see their hymn books. Are you going to be doing environmental outreach, which will engage in more young people? Are you going to be better able, skipped ahead. Are you going to be better able to deliver your mission, linking that to care for creation, which is the 5th mark of mission, and climate justice, which is the 4th mark of mission. So it's thinking through, if you're approaching a church funder, how does this benefit your parish, your community? And then if you're going to a community funder, something like Awards for All perhaps, then they want to know the impact on the wider community. They're a secular funder, so they are quite likely only to fund projects which have community benefit. So will your new heating system, your new lighting system allow a wider range of community activities to take place? If you can be specific and show that there is demand in your area for this space to be used, that's going to really help your case. For example, you're installing a new church garden. You might say that this is going to help you meet the needs of local mental health groups, disabled groups, young people. And again, if you can show that that demand is there, if you can have local groups that have said they would come and use the garden once it's installed, that'll really help you. And perhaps you can make the case that your new solar panels or bike racks or electric car charging posts are going to educate and inspire the local community to make change themselves. So you're clear about your impact. The next step is to create a fundraising plan. So you just want a simple plan that sets out the, the coming months, who's going to do what, and who's going to be, what the things are that need doing and who's going to do each step. Once you've got to that point, you should be a long way on your way. You've identified your funders you're going to apply to, you've got your plan, you've got your case for support. There are lots of national resources available to help you plan what work you want to do. So if you go onto the Net Zero Carbon Church section of our website, you'll find there's an interactive picture of a church, and you can click on each of the different parts of the diagram and it takes you through to our latest guidance about how to do that work. And we also have something called the Practical Path to Net Zero, which if you go through to that, it's a really short and simple guide to what work to do in your church if you want to cut your carbon emissions, and it goes through where to start, what to do next. And we have a self-guided checklist version that any church can use. We've also got lots of resources on our website to help you to fundraise. So if I click through on this link, hopefully it will take us onto that page. Has that worked, Matthew? Brilliant. So when you go onto our fundraising for Net Zero Carbon and Environment webpage, you'll find there's lots of useful information on here, things to do before you start, like watching our training webinars, and really useful Q&A. So I would say before you start launching into your fundraising, do have a look at these resources. And then we've got this section, finding suitable funders to apply for. There's a sample of environmental funders here with examples of the kind of things that they fund, like the Morrison Foundation. There's a sample of church funders and the kind of things that they like to fund. So for example, like the Bernard Sundling Charitable Foundation. But then up here, we've got our directories, our useful grants directories, and there are several here that we link through to. The one that I really recommend is going and looking at our environmental grants funders list. So if you click on this link here, it takes you into the grants directory, and you'll see it's got each funder, the kind of things that they fund, what they're interested in, how to apply, and generally what the sizes are, and sometimes it'll tell you the sort of the process and the dates. And as you go through, you can see there are lots and lots of different potential funders who are interested in environmental projects. They're all really competitive. There's nothing here which is a simple quick win, but the funders are out there and we've got them listed in this directory to help you find them. We've also got on our website, if you need a bit of inspiration and examples, we've got lots of case studies. So you can click through here and you will find all of our case study examples. I'll put these links in the chat in a second. Oh no, do we have chat turned on? I'm not sure when we're in Hoover. Okay, we'll have to make sure that they're shared afterwards then to the people that have come in. If you're thinking, oh, I don't even know where to start, I don't know what to do at my church, a really good first step is a subsidised energy audit, which you can get through parish buying. So if you go onto the parish buying website and you look for energy audits, you'll find all of the details there about how to register your interest in getting an audit, and they are centrally subsidised to make them more affordable for churches. Right, now over to you, Matthew.
Thank you very much, Catherine. That was wonderful. So I'm going to turn to the narrative and the evidence base at the foundation of our funding work. So if I could have the next slide, please. So just by way of a quick introduction, a couple of reasons why I'm talking to you today about this. My work is focusing on eco-transformation across the Diocese of Manchester. I'm part of the transformation team. I've got some background in environmental work. I've got a master's in environmental politics, and actually some of my work has been looking at research into theology as well. So the combination of environmentalism and theology is something I'm interested in. I'm a member of the Institute of Fundraising, and I've got some recent experience of the kind of thing that we're talking about. So if I could have the next slide, please. Thank you. So in this presentation, I'm going to set out how we might approach green fundraising locally. So I've only got 10 minutes, so it's going to be an introduction. But I'm going to do this by focusing on your local context, your parish, mission community, before pointing to how the eco-transformation work I'm involved with, which is being shared across each deanery, can help you. So I'm going to do this by discussing two main areas, the narrative and the evidence base. So I could have the next slide, please. So in terms of the funding narrative, so the funding narrative is the story that you will tell about your church and the work that you might like to do. This is foundational to the bid writing process and should include all of the information that you need in order to write successful bids. So this should not be the view of one or two people who are very active in the church, or the people who know best or are most involved. An effective narrative will set out the story of the church from multiple different stakeholder perspectives and use evidence that you have gathered from a variety of sources. So if time is not spent listening to a variety of people and engaging with a wide variety of sources, this is going to come across in the final bids that you produce. Next slide, please. So, sorry, the points that I'm going to cover are: who are you? Where are you? What are you doing already? Who are your key partners, and what's distinctive about your work? So starting with who are you? This is going to seem basic, but it's important. Details of your parish, your name, your age, your location, the people involved in leading your organisation, lay and ordained, the people that you are there for. You could consider the numbers that attend church and the numbers that are within your parish or mission community. Next slide, please. So where are you? This is the parish, mission community, deanery, diocese, ward, town, or borough. Now, I know these types of designation mean different things to different people, and you might not readily relate to them in terms of how you talk about your church. But by thinking in these terms, you'll open up your fundraising to a wider set of statistics and data about where you are. So this could be statistics showing multiple entities of deprivation or different demographic data. So a key term that you'll want for understanding where you are is another one is lower super output area as well, LSOA, which is a new government measure for local geographies which are measurable. So you can find more of those at the link English Indices of Deprivation 2019 on gov.uk, and I'll share that link with you. That covers information relating to local income, employment, health deprivation, disability, education, skills training, crime, barriers to housing services, and critically living environment as well. So can I have the next slide, please? So what are you already doing? Now, this question should cover everything that you do in the parish. This question will include your charitable objectives if you've established some as a registered charity, and it will also be shaped by your view of church and mission. So the wider your objectives, the more you can legitimately apply for. Now, funders will be looking for a wide range of activities as possible, so which relate to the stakeholders that you serve in your community. So within your funding narrative, include everything that you do, from your weekly services to parish visiting to local food bank to hosting the Mothers Union or the Women's Institute, and any other activity that you or you're doing yourself or support within your parish buildings. Consider these on their own terms and their own needs. Being able to show that your church and its halls are well used as a community asset is a big plus for any fundraising effort. So can I have the next slide, please? So who are your key partners? Funders are not always looking for churches to be working in partnership, but increasingly it is clearly to your advantage to be doing so. So this emphasis on partnership shows the funder that you have thought about who else is supporting the same place as you, and that the funding is not going to duplicate existing work. So as a local church, you can highlight your mission community and deanery networks and how each part is not only needed, but it's adding value to the collective whole. So highlight the link with larger organisations or networks such as the Diocese, who can aid the development of faculty applications, can offer resources to shape local work and provide references in terms of the impact of the change you are seeking to make. So in your deaneries, your deanery transformation support officers are mapping and networking with the local partners, and the work that they are doing will be able to connect with you with them. So these connections strengthen your narrative and add to your impact. Next slide, please. So what's distinctive about your work? So behind these basic questions is the heart of the narrative of your church. Being able to show that the work the church does is a distinctive part of the community will support the public good of the work that you do, and will show funders that you are not just trying to access their money, that they want to help, but they want it to be for a good reason, as they're already oversubscribed. The distinctive nature of the church's work will also show that the church can be trusted by your non-religious partners. Now, the narrative that you've developed so far will help to contextualize and cross-check any ideas that you have for new planned work to make sure, well, that it works. So next slide, please. So evidence base. Now, your narrative is the story that is told by the people who are living it out. But what we can do is share some resources to help evidence what's happening and how changing some things can help. So I've got 3 resources for you. These can be used in progression, one from the next, to guide the development of your narrative and the development of your evidence base across your church and mission community. So these are 1, the energy footprint tool, 2, Eco Church, and the 3rd, an Eco Stepping Stones tool. So the energy footprint tool, of 317 churches that we have across the Diocese of Manchester, 190 have engaged with the EFT process in 2022. This is about 60% of our churches that have the following data available to them already. So sources of energy used by the church, including the nature of their supply and how much they're paying for it. The church energy rating, akin to a house energy performance certificate showing the scope for improvement. The building measurements and layout, which can guide the narrative in terms of the unique challenges churches face in terms of heating. So person hours, which gives you weekly attendance, ideally beyond the scope of the weekly service book, and including the social action projects you're involved in, and an initial impact measurement in terms of the partnership working that you are doing. So this measurement will also give you a sense of the range of people that could be brought into the formation of your funding narrative. If you have not done your EFT this year, that's okay. The transformation team, including myself, your deanery support officers, your area deans, they have the information that you need to be able to complete it in 2023. Next slide, please. So in terms of Eco Church, of the 317 churches in the diocese, 108 have already registered for Eco Church. 42 have received an Eco Church award, either bronze, 29, or silver, 13. Now, what this means is that they have already completed the Eco Church survey, which covers a diverse range of activities that make up church life, including worship and teaching, buildings, land, community, and global engagement and lifestyle. So the survey is comprehensive and too long to unpack here, but this survey can guide the production of your funding narrative and help to develop the evidence base that you have in your church. And also, if you've done the EFT, the energy footprint tool, then you are already moving towards Eco Church Bronze too. Now, the award scheme is not just a badge to wear either. Now, by attaining an Eco Church award, you are showing funders that you are committed to the cause for which you are asking for their money. So if you've not registered for EcoChurch, you can visit the diocesan website or drop me an email and I'll signpost you to what you need. So failing that, speak to your Deanery Transformation Officer and they will have what you need also. Next slide, please. So finally is the Eco Stepping Stones. Now, you'll be aware of the Stepping Stones for Growth resource that's currently available for free on the diocesan website. In 2023, we'll be launching a new resource to supplement this course, Eco Stepping Stones. So this resource will help you look beyond your parish context and see the hidden leopards, to use the Stepping Stones language, or those who are beyond our parish life, but share our interests. This resource will help to define the journey you are on. This resource will also show the contacts we have across life events, toddler groups, social action projects, our digital presence, seasonal engagements, and links with schools. The key contribution of the resource will be to show how the eco-focus we have related to milestones such as EFT and EcoChurch, and it'll take us beyond those things into a deeper engagement with our faith and the mission God is calling us to. This all feeds back into our narrative and the evidence we have for our fundraising. So here I've set out foundational work for effective green fundraising based on the funding narrative and evidence base that you need. So this work is vital for effective returns on fundraising. Do check out other key resources for fundraising too on the fundraising pages of the diocesan website. Now, one that I will draw your attention to is the Open for Communities portal. This is something that's been signed up to by the Diocese of Manchester, Chester and Leeds, and it's something that I've used for my fundraising work as well. As I understand it, there are training workshops available and the possibility of one-to-one coaching in terms of developing your list of funders and your funding bids. So certainly something to keep in mind. I'll leave it there. So I think what we'll do as well is hand over to you in the time that we have remaining for questions. So if you want to either raise your hand in person or you can use one of the little reactions on the screen to raise your hand as well. And I know we've covered a lot of ground during that time as well, so it might be that you're just taking a second. I've got a question from Andrew there. You could unmute yourself. There we go. Thank you.
Hi, thanks very much for that presentation. I guess a lot of us are sitting here thinking, wow, it's amazing, all these resources, but it's obviously going to take a lot of person hours to get some of these funding proposals off the ground. Is there any guidance anywhere about employing a fundraiser to kind of boost the fundraising that we need to do? Because I guess a lot of us are sitting here, we're kind of in charge or working in kind of small to medium churches, and it's just a question really of staffing power, really, that I think is probably one of the biggest barriers.
That's a good question, Andrew. In terms of specific advice, I think the best thing for me to do at this point is to signpost you to Paul Bailey, because he will have a clear understanding of what the diocesan approach to that kind of thing is. I understand completely where you're coming from, and part of the work that I referred to that I've done previously is as a fundraising consultant. So I know there are people out there, and I'm sure there are people who are far more qualified than I am to respond to your query, but I think Paul Bailey is probably the best person to start with.
Thank you.
I think anecdotally, from what I hear, there are some very good fundraisers out there, but I would always see if you can get recommendations from other parishes, because some fundraisers I think are more successful than others. So getting word of mouth recommendations is always valuable, as it is with so many things.
Thank you, Angie, for your question.
I'm still trying to work out quite how Hoover works, but I'm putting the links I had on my slides into the chat in Hoover, and I'm hoping that means that everyone can find them there.
I can see a question from Matt Carson. Are you muted?
I'm afraid we can't hear you.
Sorry, Matt.
Sorry.
Oh.
No. You could write it on a piece of paper and hold it up.
Or type in the Q&A or chat on the screen.
Yeah, I'm just... Matt, are you able to put it into the Hoover Q&A? It's a shame we can't hear you, because I'm certain it's going to be a really helpful question.
Yeah.
Good question. Okay, so I've got a question from Matt on Hoover. How long does a building and fundraising narrative take? How long have you got? I think the key thing with this is to work through all of the questions that you think are necessary, and that maybe the ones that we've set out in the presentations, working through them in a way which gives you confidence that you've covered all your bases. I think each parish is different, and I think as a result you're going to spend different amounts of time. You'll also have people with different level of experiences in terms of developing a narrative. So there is no straightforward answer, but I think you'll have a sense of confidence in terms of what you've produced. Catherine, do you want to add to that?
I think it depends so much on the scale of the project. If what you're trying to do is raise £500 to put some veg beds in a unused corner of your churchyard, it might be that you could write your case of support in a couple of hours. If what you're trying to do is raise £100,000 to do a major overhaul of your church with a new heating system and insulation, then you're likely to need architects, you're likely to need faculty, you're likely to need, quotes from contractors. You're probably going to have to demonstrate, if you're applying to any community funders, that the work will actually enable far more community use of your building. That will probably mean doing some kind of community research to find out what unmet needs there are in the area. So it could be a much more gradual and lengthy process to gather all of that information you need to be at the stage where you're ready to start applying for funders. So it's horses for courses.
Thank you, Matt. Nick, I can see your hands raised.
Yeah, thank you. There's maybe something particularly for you. Obviously, we're committed nationally as a church and also as a diocese to get carbon net zero by 2030, which is a huge task and an entirely right and urgent one. I was just wondering, is there anything that's helpful to say at this stage about the timelines and game plan that we're working with nationally in terms of continuing support, and whether there's likely to be any releasing of funding for the commissioners to help with this, because a lot of the projects we're looking at now are going to be long-term planning.
Yep.
So if there is anything that's clear on timelines, that might be really helpful.
Have you seen, Nick, the route map to net zero carbon by 2030 that went to General Synod in July? That ringing any bells?
I have. Yep, I remember seeing that around. I should probably digest it in much more detail to ask the question. But, yeah.
So the net zero carbon route map, I'll find the link and put it in the Hoover chat, sets out at a national level what we know about the kind of change that's being needed for schools, for churches, for offices, for cathedrals, for TEIs, in terms of leadership, in terms of communications, in terms of capacity building. It sets out that direction of travel of what we know needs to be done. We're currently in the process of creating much shorter versions for specific groups. So there'll be a shorter summary version for churches, one for schools, one for cathedrals, one for TEIs, and one for dioceses, because we know only so many people want to read a 60-page route map. So we're pulling out of it what are the key points and the key milestones for each of those audiences, and we're aiming to have those finished and out by the end of October. And we've then got alongside that the case studies that illustrate the fact that this is real and people have done it. We've got a whole range of lovely case study videos now that show that it is possible. In terms of the second half of your question about funding, so the church commissioners have committed that in the next triennium, so 2023 to 2025, they're committing £30 million of national funding, and over the 9 years we have coming up, it's going to be 190 million. So 30 in that first triennium, then around 100, then around 60 million. Those are significant amounts of funding and very much to be welcomed, but they are only a proportion of what's going to be needed. So they will be there to part fund projects, but there'll still be a real need for local fundraising. That first triennium, a lot of it is going to be about getting ready, capacity building, building capacity in the diocese and centrally, getting energy audits done and action plans done and feasibility studies done. Moving into that second triennium with the 100 million is going to be more looking at capital works. There are no specific announcements yet about this. It's not like we've got to the stage of saying, right, here's the grant fund that you can apply into. We're earlier than that. So they're setting up a new net zero carbon board that will make the funding decisions and recruiting a net zero carbon director who will manage that program of work. And hopefully those two things will be in place by the end of this year, so that as we come into the triennium next year, the funding programs can begin at that point. Watch this space, I think.
That's great. Thank you. It's really helpful.
Can I just add to that as well, Nick? I recognise that we're going from the national level to the parish level with this, and I'm sat somewhere in here in terms of my role. As you know, part of what I did with the Energy Footprint tool was stay in touch on a regular basis, trying to kind of drive momentum for the work that was being done, and we've seen success with that. Likewise, with the broadening of the eco initiatives across the diocese, I can help with that. So in terms of how we share what Catherine's just been talking about and the kind of questions you've got, Nick, if you can give me guidance on what you need, I can get it kind of circulated and just add that capacity into the Deanery and Mission community conversations as well.
I'm so impressed by the figures you gave before as well, Matthew. To have a 60% return rate on the EFT and 42 Eco Church awards out of 317 churches, that's amazing. Manchester's doing brilliantly.
I think the key narrative has been teamwork's making the dream work. People are working together and it's showing returns, which is great. So I'm aware we've got 1 minute left of our 40 for this session. Are there any further questions? That's a no, I think. In which case, as host, I just want to say, Catherine, thank you very much for your time and your expertise and what you've brought to this. Very much appreciate it. And for everybody else, thank you for your time and your willingness to be here and to listen. This presentation is going to be available on the platform, the Hoover platform, for the next 3 months. And of course, I'm here and available for any questions you've got about how we're going to apply this locally as well.
May I really encourage you to watch those webinars that I pointed towards on our website, because we've had to go so quickly today, and the webinars, we've got 3 1.5 hour sessions that take you through environmental fundraising. So I'm conscious we had to gallop today. If you want to go through it again in more detail, those webinar recordings are there for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's very informative and helpful. If a bit scary.